Hi there, this is William with Common Motor, that's common-motor.com, and in this video we'll be getting into the electrical components on our long-haul CB450 project, so stay tuned. Alright, so if you're just joining us, we've been prepping this Honda CB450 for a road trip, and so far we've done a tune-up on the engine and we've rebuilt the carburetors. Before we can put everything back together though, we need to set the ignition timing, and before we do that, we're going to inspect and potentially replace a lot of the electrical components. So let's see what we got on here right now. Alright, so the most critical circuits on the bike are the charging system and the ignition system. So those are the first two we're going to deal with. As far as the charging system goes, we have this aftermarket rectifier in there that looks like it was from Radio Shack. That'll get replaced, as well as probably the starter solenoid here. We're still on the fence if we're going to run the electric starter or not, so that might just get removed altogether. We're going to leave the stock battery box because we're going to use a full-size AGM Motobat battery, so that's going to stay the same. Now you'll see down here mounted underneath the battery box is the original voltage regulator. You can see it's still wired into the system, so it's been used this whole time. So that unit, as well as this Radio Shack rectifier up here, are going to get replaced with a single unit, a modern regulator rectifier combo. Beyond that, I'm going to replace the ground wire for the battery that was clearly from from a truck or something, with the right size, as well as these bolts that are SAE and all hacked off, clearly not there from the factory. Those will get swapped out as well. First thing in the ignition system that'll get swapped out are the contact points here. We'll put some new old stock made in Japan points in there, as well as replace this points wire, which is just wrapped in electrical tape. You can tell that they're still running the factory coils. Those will get swapped out, as well as the condensers. The condensers are just capacitors, man. They wear out just like anything, just like the ones in a guitar amp. So we got to replace those for sure on any build. Make sure to clean all the connectors. You can see that this one's all pretty dusty. The barrels, as well as the multi-pins, scrub them out real good. Hit them with some electrical cleaner. Beyond that, the spark plug wires, spark plug boots, and spark plugs themselves are common gremlins if you're not getting a strong spark. So those will all get replaced. All right, so all that's really left on the electrical system of this bike is the lighting and controls. So we're going to leave the stock tail light and the stock turn signals. Just make sure all the bulbs are working fine. We're going to leave the stock headlight bucket, but we're going to replace the sealed beam lens with one that allows you to put an interchangeable H4 bulb. And you could use a halogen, but I think we're going to go with the LED upgrade because it's the brightest one. We're definitely going to use a modern flasher relay instead of this old big one here, as well as going through the signal boxes up top, making sure they're all clean and the switches in them are doing what they're supposed to. Other than that, just making sure all the indicator bulbs and all the little things are working like they should. That's about it, so let's get into it. Okay, so let me take you through everything I went ahead and replaced on the bike or modified. Starting at the rear of the bike, the turn signals had the ground wire coming off this bolt down here, and they still do, but I cleaned them up quite a bit, put some heat shrink around them so that the rear light wiring is in better shape. Getting here to the battery box, the old voltage regulator and rectifier got replaced with our combo unit here. I went ahead and just bent the tang from the old rectifier down so it fits in there nicely. Got it mounted on the bottom here with the bolt. Leaving the old starter solenoid because I'm going to leave the starter in there for now, and I kickstart most of the time anyway, so not worried about it. Fresh negative battery wire that came off an older bike, cleaned it up because the one that was on here was not the original, let's just say. Working forward to the ignition system, we got new coils on here, new condenser, plug wires, boots, spark plugs. So pretty much everything up here is refreshed, including the point wires. Here I went ahead and just ran new wires, new terminals for the fresh points, and put some thermal shield on it, as well as an electronic flasher relay right here, wired to the turn signals. Okay, moving forward still, we've pulling apart the switch boxes, which appear to be in pretty good shape. All the switches kind of function as they should. Doesn't look like it's been monkeyed with. So we're going to go ahead and try to run these again. We'll test them once everything's back together to make sure they're still in proper working order. Same goes for the instrument bulbs. We'll get everything back together and test them and determine if we even need to pull them apart or not. Now that we're at the headlight bucket, as you can see, I've removed the whole lens and trim ring assembly. Now, something that we get asked about constantly is where to physically do our charging system mod, where you connect the yellow wire to the white wire. Well, one place to do it is in the headlight bucket. It's probably the easiest place to do it, and we'll show you. Someone had already done this on this bike, so it just goes to show that it's not just us that had this idea. It's a common thing. But let me point out an important distinction. You can see this tied together right here. You see a yellow wire and a white and yellow with a yellow stripe wire, and they're tied together, and that looks great, right? You might see this and say to yourself, look, someone already did this mod. Well, this is actually the harness for the switch box. This isn't the harness that goes to the bike, so if you're tying both sides of the switch together, it doesn't do you any good. You just switched all day long, but you haven't changed the charging circuit at all. What we're actually looking to do is find the harness from the bike. I can see it's right here. Yeah, the big fat harness that goes to the rest of the bike also is going to have the yellow and white wire coming out of it, and that's where you need to tie it together, which someone has already done. So that job is done for us. This is a pretty effective way to do it. Just cut it here at the headlight bucket. This one you don't even need to do, but the one that's coming from the bike harness, definitely tie the yellow wire to the white wire, connecting both halves of the stator together, giving you full power all the time. Okay, over here on the bench, we've removed the factory sealed beam headlight, and mounting ring, trim ring, all that jazz comes out if you want to change out the lens. Now the headlight is mounted to the lens mounting ring, which is mounted to the trim ring, which is mounted to the headlight bucket. So all those things have to be taken apart if you're going to replace the lens. So the first thing is the trim ring is mounted to the headlight through these points with these 3 screws right here. Once those are taken out, you can remove the whole assembly. From there, the mounting ring is mounted to the trim ring with these 3 screws. We have a side adjustment screw and a top and bottom little pivot. Once that's removed, you can take the lens out of the mounting ring here using these 2 screws right here. So at this point, we're ready to replace this, looks like an automotive sealed beam headlight, with our lens that allows for a replaceable H4 bulb of your choosing when your headlight goes out. Alright, so we got the front end back together. I put a fresh MotoBat battery in here and we started testing everything, making sure the switch boxes worked and all the connections were making good contact. Realized two things right off the bat. The first was that while the turn signals were illuminating when I would turn the switch to either side, they weren't flashing. That led me to believe that I had just installed the flasher relay backwards, which was the case. Swapped the leads here on the flasher relay and it started flashing just fine, so that was easy. The next thing I noticed was that neither of the buttons on the switch boxes were working while all the other switches were working fine. The buttons, be it the horn and the starter button, both ground to the system, through the circuit, through the handlebars. So they need to make connection with the rest of the ground circuit. So I made a little lead and I hooked it to the stud that mounts to the handlebars, wired it into the headlight bucket and connected that part of the circuit together. Now the horn works and the starter button works, so that was the only problem from there. Beyond that, setting the ignition timing is the only thing that we have left to do, and we have a whole video explaining how to do that on all the bikes that we support, so check that video out. We also have another one talking about batteries. If you don't know what kind of battery you should get, if you're thinking of running a lithium ion, you should watch that video because we go through the right type of battery for these bikes, as well as a charging system video if you are considering upgrading to the solid state regulator rectifier combo we just put in today. Alright, this is William with Common Motor. Follow along with us on the long haul project. We're going to get into the rear end of the bike next. Be sure to follow us on Facebook and Instagram, subscribe to our newsletter and YouTube channel, and we'll see you next time.